Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Here I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids in Melbourne, Australia without any help from knowing much or from equipment, from greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers or anything else really, just me and them, inside, outside, or we can't play at all. No nonsense growing plant lovers, so if that's your bag, hit subscribe because I post every week on a Friday. And my ramblings are often amateurish and a lot of things end up on the compost heap, but they might help you in your orchid journey. And today's journey ends or begins with these rather gorgeous winter flowering beauties. Yes, it is deep, bleak midwinter here in Melbourne, but there is a lot of Cymbidium action going on. Now, some of these are species and some are not, and it's early in the season, but the Cymbidium season is a movable feast depending on many things. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to touch base with the ones that are in bloom right now, because there's a whole nother sway that'll be really peaking in about a month and a half's time. So let's have a look at these and just talk about some early flowering ones that are going to give you great color and form in bleakest midwinter. Okay, so the first cab off the rank is this, which is so massive. There's actually another spike over there, but it's too big for me to show you. But look at that flower. Isn't it beautiful? Now, as you can see, it looks very much like tracyanum. And it is a no ID hybrid that I bought 3-ish years ago, I think. I bought it in bloom just because I loved the flowers. It doesn't have that kind of olive color that tracyanum does, but clearly there's a lot of tracyanum in its blood. The first time I bought it, it flowered in August, which is end of winter here in Australia. Last year it flowered in May, which is autumn in Australia. And right now I'm filming this on the last day of June, so let's say July. So which is midwinter. So it's changeable, this one. It can either be a little early or very much into winter. But tracyanum itself tends to be an autumn-winter flowerer. So if you can find something that's got some tracyanum blood in it, you are going to have orchids at this sort of late autumn or winter period, depending which time your exact plant flowers, period of time, which is something to behold because there's not a lot going on that's beautiful, colorful, and slightly fragrant at this time. So all of these are cool climate Cymbidiums. I do have some warmer climate ones. If you're in a cooler climate, these are the types you're going to find available. The warmer growing ones will be more specialized. If you're in a warmer climate, of course, there are many tropical Cymbidiums and hybrids thereof that can take subtropical and intermediate conditions. So you will be able to find those. But these are all cool climate ones. So most of these ancestors come from high altitudes in the Himalayas. So sort of all the way across from India, Nepal, Bhutan, across there, Assam, across into southern China and the mountainous regions of Vietnam and Laos, sort of all around that area. There are lots and lots of high altitude, cool loving Cymbidium species, which have been hybridized over time to produce some of these. And I think if you go into a hardware store, a chain store, nursery, you'll find Cymbidiums, hybrid Cymbidiums in bloom, really from autumn onwards. So really depend upon your location as to where you are. But generally, most of my hybrid Cymbidiums tend to bloom late winter, early spring. Most of my species ones tend to bloom autumn, early winter. And then there's a few that just do their own thing randomly. So this one, large plant, but I love that kind of very open spider-like type of flower on Cymbidiums. So you can get the very round sort of saucery shaped ones, which I'm not such a fan of for some reason. Don't know why. I love this shape of the flower more. And I love the way that the flower spikes form and the flowers kind of stand up and present themselves to you. So this is probably my more favored Cymbidium type, but you know what? I don't mind, as long as they're gorgeous. It doesn't really matter. I do have some of the more rounded ones. Now, I'm just going to drop in some footage of where this one lives, which actually demonstrates the perfect growing conditions. So dappled light and relatively moist. But let me just read from one of our oracles about basic Cymbidium care. So this is J.N. Rentoul. He has a series of 4 orchid books. Each one specializes in a different genus or groups thereof. And 1 volume is actually dedicated to Australian orchids. So there's 4 in total. They're out of print, but you can find them in secondhand bookshops or online. So do have a look. Growing Orchids, books 1 to 4. So the first one is Cymbidiums and Slippers. And there's just 2 paragraphs I want to read out about Cymbidiums because it's really interesting. So this is just about growing conditions. So this is what you might need to bear in mind when it comes to potting, etc. As plants, Cymbidiums are really epiphytes, plants which commonly grow on trees or rock surfaces but are not parasites. As with the Australian Cymbidiums, the best plants are found growing in hollow ends of limbs and in knot holes in trees. The roots penetrating the hollow and decaying interior of the trees, frequently filling the cavity, the leaves forming a draining system into the interior to further introduce rainwater to reduce the heartwood to plant food. Forks of trees are also convenient perches for Cymbidiums, the plant forming a food trap to hold decaying vegetation. There you go. So, potting wise, you just really want a loose, free draining medium, and I use out of the bag orchid mix, which is sort of medium bark and a little bit grainy. You can just use pure bark. You can mix pure bark with a little bit of regular potting compost if you want, but just imagine that the ancestors of your Cymbidium, your cool growing Cymbidium, are in that sort of decaying wood environment. Very, very free draining, but really rich and moist and nutritious. So that's this baby. The tracyanum hybrid or derivative thereof. Very, very beautiful flowers. Now I'm going to shimmy that across and just show you something else in bloom. Okay, the next cab off our rank is this beautiful species Cymbidium called maguanense. And I've made a video about this one in the past. And as you can see, it's an interesting growth form. It's almost vanda-like in that it kind of grows a stem and it flowers from each leaf juncture up the stem as a vanda would. So with most Cymbidiums, you get a pseudobulb that matures and then that produces the flower spike in the following flower season, whereas this flowers from a stem, which is unusual. And this is the best year I have had flowering for this. Look at it. I don't actually know. There are little spikes in there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think, 7 spikes growing in there. So as you can see, it's very upright and the flowers are kind of concealed in the leaves. So it's a little tricky. I think this is very much for the collector. It's not a showstopper type of Cymbidium, but it does have a beautiful sort of light lemony hyacinth fragrance, really beautiful. So it's midwinter and this is a winter flower. Maguanense is named after the area in southern Yunnan in China where it was found only in the 90s, so relatively recently. And it's a beautiful delicate white flower. Now mine is a little bit too enmeshed in the area where I'm growing them outside, as you can see from this video. It's a little low, I think it's a little too enclosed and there's a lot of leaf litter has built up. So the flowers often suffer. And I think they're definitely nibbled. And I think perhaps it might be a fraction too cold in winter, cold and wet. So the flowers are never perfect, but I'm going to work on that in a new environment to try and give it more air movement and a little bit more light and elevate it a little bit so that it's not so susceptible to insects, and maybe a little bit of more protection so the flowers don't get so nibbled. But it's a really elegant and very unusual orchid, and I love these clusters of flowers in the center of the foliage here, but perhaps more than anything, this really unusual growth habit. And mine has just started to grow another leader spike there, and there's another one growing at the back here, which you can just see growing up there. So interesting plant, very, very interesting. And it will, as I said, send flower spikes, and I will try and come in and show you where it's coming from. So yeah, weird vanda-like habits, so that, yeah, the flower spike is coming out of the juncture of the leaf as the stem increases. So there you go, quite unusual. Cymbidium maguanense, I think a collector's orchid. If you like bold Cymbidiums, not for you, but if you're into species plants and also fragrant orchids, then this is for you. And mine is getting the same care as everything else, although it might need a little bit more protection. Okay, clearing the decks even more, plant lovers, we have this stunning no ID hybrid. Now, I just want to show you the form of this plant. Isn't that the most elegant thing? And it's got flower spikes everywhere. Look at it, it's just divine. So it's one of those smaller plants, and often smaller plants can be quite pendant, but this one is kind of slightly pendant, but not very. So it's the most sensational hybrid. No ID, I bought it from a Facebook marketplace. So it is anonymous, but it's a really, really beautiful plant. Quite small pseudobulbs, relatively compact growth, really gorgeous form, but these divine pinky magenta flowers, and a lot of them too, which is really great to see. I'm just wondering if it is. It's actually got multiple spikes from a single bulb, which quite unusual. I haven't seen that in any of my other Cymbidiums, so there you go. Very, very beautiful. So if you're strapped for space, trying to find a plant that's described as compact is a great idea, because you can see this tracyanum hybrid type is one of those massive plants, absolutely massive, and difficult to manage unless you've got a lot of outdoor space. Here in Melbourne, you can certainly grow Cymbidiums outdoors. They just love it. In fact, in a lot of southern Australia, you can. They can take relatively cold temperatures at night, but not if it's ongoing. If you've got months of sub-zero or sub 32 degrees Fahrenheit, they're not going to love it. But the odd night where it dips, they can certainly handle. They can't deal with frost though. Maybe the odd one, if it's mild, but certainly not if you are in a very frosty area. Otherwise, they love life outside. And as they are a forest dweller and they're getting dappled light in the nooks and crannies of trees. So let's talk light from our friend J.N. Rentoul and his book, which is #1 in his 4-book series, Cymbidiums and Slippers. And he says, one of the best aspects for Cymbidiums is direct sunlight in the first hours of the day, speckled sunlight for the following few hours, with the hottest period offering shade. So morning sun, which would obviously be east facing, and in Australia, southern hemisphere, as the sun passes to the north, you want a bit of protection. And then as the sun heads to the west, which in Australia can be quite fierce afternoon sun, a lot more protection. So that is the perfect spot. Now mine, where they are now, don't get great morning sun, but they do get great late morning and midday sun, and they are protected from the afternoon sun. So it's kind of good enough. They would flower, I think, better if they were getting better light conditions in the morning. I think generally better light conditions. But anyway, light is always the thing. If you have Cymbidiums that haven't bloomed, it's because you're not giving them enough light, I would say. But this one, I just wanted to show you because it is a beauty, an absolute beauty. And it's, again, relatively early in the season. It is still midwinter, but this one has burst into bloom and it is so delicious. And it's covered in flowers, not fragrant, but a very, very vigorous plant. So I'm happy with that. Now, the other winter flowering Cymbidium is this little species beauty, which is Cymbidium Dion. There you go. Can we see that? There we are. Now, I've made a video about this a few weeks ago, so I'll link that here. Won't go into the details too much, except to say, firstly, it's a compact plant, very lovely gentle racemes with beautiful little flowers. But I think the thing I wanted to say most is that everything you read about this suggests that the flowers don't last very long. Well, plant lovers, I'm here to say wrong, 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 because these are probably now in their 6th week. I think the top one is just beginning to go over, but still there, still bright, still shining. It's a beautiful little thing. I will repot it in spring into a terracotta pot so it's more attractive. And dayanum has a really wide distribution throughout Southeast Asia and up into Japan. So very variable. It can certainly take warmer subtropical and tropical conditions, but it can also take cooler conditions. So this is one of those orchids, one of those Cymbidiums that straddles that temperature need. So it will bloom more often during the year in a warmer climate, and probably just once a year in my cooler climate. It's all dependent upon new growth. So there you go. That's a little outlying anomaly. Very happy to flower in winter in Melbourne, but if you're in somewhere warmer or tropical, you might get more flowers all year. So there we are, plant lovers. Cymbidiums in bloom in midwinter. There are options. They're certainly out there for you. Have a look at species. Some species flower early and some of them are really quite beautiful flowers, so you can really extend your season, and most of those cool climate species will take exactly the same conditions as your hybrid Cymbidiums. So get one or two to mix it up, and this is a very pretty little thing. So there we are. I love a Cymbidium and these are just bringing me joy this very bleak winter. So plant lovers, I hope you're being brought joy wherever you are, and I very much look forward to seeing you next week. So take care wherever you are. Next Friday will be another rambling adventure, but do hit subscribe if you want to know what it is, and I look forward to seeing you then.